I think the fastest way that people will become familiar and build something that's really awesome is if they go and try to build it for themselves. So I would say go and try to build something and then sell it to someone. And that is going to be the way that you're going to learn this technology the fastest. Prototype super early and de-risk research as early as possible. Double down where you see conviction with your customers, and then build for production. We are defining and creating a market that really nobody fully understands. Always important that research is leading the way on how we think about that path to AGI and safe AGI, but product should be truly harmonious in that process.
Welcome to Building with AI, the show where we engage in conversations with world-class AI product builders and leaders. We help uncover tactical insights to help you build and scale better AI products. I'm your host, Hamza Choudery, and today I'm joined by Scott White, a product leader at Anthropic. Scott brings a wealth of experience from his time at companies like Dropbox, Wealthfront, Instacart, and Airtable. It was at Airtable where Scott first gained hands-on experience integrating LLMs into software. At Anthropic, Scott contributed to the development of Claude. Today, he'll take us behind the scenes, sharing the principles and frameworks employed by one of the most innovative AI companies in the world. During the episode, he discusses how the product org is structured at Anthropic, his framework for de-risking AI products, Anthropic's AI development process, bridging the gap between research and product, and much more. But before we dig in, here's a quick word from our sponsor. Autoblocks is the leading AI evaluation platform for product teams. It enables your team to collaboratively iterate on prompts, model parameters, and RAG parameters, while letting you retain full control over whatever frameworks or tech stack you want to build with. Seamlessly run tests to evaluate the impact of product changes on quality. Learn how to ship more reliable LLM products at Autoblocks.ai. Now, back to the episode.
Good morning, Scott. Welcome to the show. Good morning. Thanks for having me. Of course, yeah, we're really excited for this conversation. Excited to hear about all of the great work you're doing at Anthropic. But before we get started, I'd love to hear a bit about your career journey and how you eventually ended up at Anthropic. Yeah, sure thing. So I, long time ago, graduated Stanford. I'm from the Bay Area. I was born here and also went to college here. And when I was graduating and I was deciding between going into finance or going into technology, so I had one offer at an investment bank and one offer at Dropbox. I'm very happy that I made the decision to go to Dropbox. I started my career there working in a rotational capacity. So it was actually very interesting. I worked in a bunch of different jobs across sales, support even, go-to-market and marketing and product. And so it was a great first job because I got to see a ton of different roles, have a ton of different ventures, and learn what components of the business were the most interesting to me. And I ended up landing in sort of a growth role at the intersection of product and marketing, trying to drive traffic and adoption for our business offering. I learned sort of product was the area that I was most passionate about and excited in, and I followed a former manager to Wealthfront, which is a consumer fintech company, and that's where I really cut my teeth on kind of core 0 to 1 product development, and I was leading a lot of the new finance products that they were building, and that was also a good experience working in a heavily regulated, very hardware-dependent, difficult to build ecosystem. So it was a good place early in my career to learn about product management and how to build something really complex in a complex ecosystem. There, I met some brilliant engineers that I was excited to try starting a company with. And so I started a company in the kind of no-code test automation space. So when you're creating software, you have to test your software before pushing it to production. And our solution allowed you to write those test cases and test scenarios without the need for writing code. And so QA managers or data product managers could use our product to set up test suites. And we worked on that for a few years. We were acquired by Airtable back in 2021. And at Airtable, I was leading some of the core product work. And so the end user experience and the core use cases. And I worked there for a number of years building up that platform. And that's where I first got exposed to AI. One of the things that we started to build while I was there were integrating the large language model capabilities or building blocks of Airtable. So Airtable is sort of a toolkit, like a Lego kit for building software applications. And so the thing that was some about it was that it had all of those building blocks for software already built. It has the database layer, the UI layer, the logic layer through automations to be able to transform that data. And so when AI really started taking off and APIs started becoming available, working at Airtable was awesome because we already had all of those primitives and building blocks working. So I could immediately, very quickly implement into that structure early AI applications. So I remember a couple, almost probably 18 months ago now, sitting in a cafe and working on building an app for ingesting news articles for a communications executive leader, extracting key themes and spotting opportunities in your existing marketing coverage where you're not responding to sort of overall narrative about your business. And I remember building that at a cafe over the weekend and the next week showing it to the CMO of a multinational retailer. And that was sort of an extremely magical moment to me to see how much you could create with such little sort of investment and time, and how much that technology can sort of unlock the creativity and build new solutions. And then on the flip side, for demoing and working with large enterprises, I saw the urgency which they wanted to adopt this sort of technology and how they saw it transforming their business. And the combination of that sort of magic that I felt building those early applications and the magic and the impact that I saw from the companies that I was working with, I was just super excited to work in this space. And I became familiar with Anthropic, both through the, me actually building our product and then some new product primitives off the models and talking to our customers about the various models that they were excited about, in addition to hearing things like Dario on podcasts, and then also knowing a bunch of people who ultimately went there, and my sort of excitement for that space, seeing the impact that it was having at Airtable and leading the AI initiatives there. I was really excited to get closer to the mix on that. And so I joined Anthropic about 6 months ago. And that is my sort of journey on how I got here. And at Anthropic, I'm working on our applications. So things like Claude.ai, both for consumers and for businesses, and making these sorts of models available to larger groups of people and transforming the way that they solve problems both at home and at work. I'm curious to hear about how the product organization is structured at Anthropic. I know you mentioned that you're working on the application side of things. How is the broader team organized? I think viewing intelligence as a product is often very ambiguous. So I'm curious to hear about what the mental models within the company are for viewing different user experiences. You're right. You're spot on that building something like large language models is very different than building traditional software, and or structure is a little bit unique because of how dynamic and new building with these LLMs are. The way that we structure our product org is we have 4 high-level pillars. The first is research and product research, and that is really the connectivity between what the research team is doing on pre-training and fine-tuning to the product organization and how we think about what the market looks like, what our users need, and bridging the gap between that work And so you can think of one as product research, which is really deeply embedded with the research team on understanding the model assembly line and life cycle and the capabilities. The second, I would say, is our platform organization. And you can think about that allowing developers to either integrate these models into the product that they are building and delivering to their customers, or building internal tooling or technologies for their organization that use these models. So that's more of a developer-focused audience and building the tooling for those developers, both first party through our own solution and also through third-party partners like AWS and GCP. And then the third part of the organization, I would say, is TNS, trust and safety. I think more horizontal function that works with everybody to ensure that safety is really deeply embedded into the process of what we're building everywhere. And so they're the experts on enabling the organization on that dimension. And then the last one is applications, which is what I lead, which is how can we make these models available to non-technical audiences at home and at work to get the value out of these models and transform the way that they solve problems. That's Claude.ai, which is both free and prosumer, and then also business products that we've built to get access to the latest family of models. So that's at a high level how we have structured our product. Super helpful. And you alluded to this a bit, but I'm keen to double click into your statement around developing AI products being quite distinct versus traditional code. What are some of the differences and similarities that are top of mind when you think about your learning so far at Anthropic? Yeah, there are lots. I think that the first and maybe primary one I would call unpredictability and non-determinism. With traditional software, you sort of have a fixed set of resources. You have an idea of what you want to build. You have a customer problem that you're working on, and you can deterministically design something that you think solves that problem, parallelize a bunch of engineering resources to go and build the thing that solves that problem, and then work with your customer and sell them a solution and hopefully solve their problem with what you've done. People don't need to always build in a waterfall fashion, but you can think of it as a sort of deterministic process. But with these models, there's a lot of unpredictability and variance of what the models are capable of, both from when you think that you want to, orient it to do something in particular in the training phase, and how you get surprised with what the models are capable of. But then also the unpredictability at how your customers will actually ingest and use these models to solve problems for themselves. Such a malleable technology that can do so many different things. And so you get surprised by your customers at like an order of magnitude more than what I'd seen in previous roles. And leaning on into those surprises and starting to productize them is really fun. And so I think that is an area that is really unique. And then there are a lot of other things. I think there are a lot more ethical considerations with building in the AI sphere than in other spheres. A lot more is unknown. The technology is much more of a black box, and you need to be way more diligent upfront about building the infrastructure and the frameworks to make sure that you're embedding safety and ethics into your process of development. And while that exists, in other companies as well, that is such a core piece of what we do here at a level that I think is more top of mind than a lot of other organizations. And then I say there are a couple other things. I mean, user education. This is such a new sphere and a new way of working with technology that people haven't fully learned about, and today are still largely white boxes that people need to become familiar with things like prompting. And we're in such early phases of this that your new paradigms of what you need to build to interact with customer are changing and evolving day by day. I think about something like when rideshare technology came out, 15 years ago or so, there were new ways that you would have to interact with these apps using the maps in terms of methodologies of pricing, like surge pricing. They sort of stumbled upon these new ways of implementing capabilities to solve particular problems that came up in this novel solution. And we're seeing that too, as we're learning about this technology, learning about the ways that people are adopting it. And then the last thing I would say is interdisciplinary collaboration, basically. In my experience, before this, it had been mostly working with sales and marketing and engineering and other product managers and designers to sort of build in that deterministic loop that I was talking about. But research and trust and safety and policy are such critical components of what we do here that there are new sort of interdisciplinary styles and ways of working with these people, many of whom on the research side maybe haven't worked in commercial businesses before. And it's a new process to work with these people and understand that research to product development, much longer and much more non-deterministic than the design to prototype to build. And actually, I'll continue on the prototype angle here. The other thing I would say is on non-determinism, it's so critical to build prototypes in this industry or this sort of sphere, because you don't really know how the technology will feel. You don't know what it's capable of until you're actually using it. And so part of our product development process is creating those prototypes as early as humanly possible in that process so that we could really understand the magic of what we were building, the malleability of what we were building, what use cases it will solve for, and also an opportunity for us to dog food it internally, solve our own problems, and then figure out how we can work with customers to position that as well. But I would say that prototypes are so much more critical here than in any other industry. Super, super interesting. And specifically talking about the applications team, love to hear about what that product development process looks like end to end. I know that it is cyclical, and with AI products, you're often iterating given the non-determinism. You might find failure modes that you didn't anticipate, but if you were to map out sort of the canonical workflows on your team, what would those look like? I think in general, first principles, you start with your goals and what you're trying to accomplish as an organization. You have specific objectives that stem from those goals, and then you have a vision for where your product is going. And in a year, 2 years, what do we think success looks like for the surface of Claude and our applications? From there, you think about what are the capabilities we need at a side level and a longer term to ladder it into that overall objective or that overall vision of where we're going. And if you think about Claude as sort of an expert collaborator that can help you get work done that would have taken weeks and now do that in days, that we need to accomplish and build today that will continue being sort of stronger and more durable over time. Things like knowledge and intelligence, things like proactiveness. These are the kinds of things that we might have a number of different capabilities that we're building for us on a longer term roadmap. And then I think, as I sort of mentioned, we want to de-risk research as early as possible. And so combining a designer, a product manager, a set of engineers, and a researcher to build the earliest version of prototypes of what we could have built as new capabilities that would go into our platform on a separate sort of interface for internal dogfooding. And that's the example of us building a portfolio of different bets and understanding very early which ones we think are going to have the highest sort of reward. And then to something like Artifacts, which was built as a malleable canvas inside of Claude.ai for viewing things like rich web content, code, and documents that you could create directly with Claude. It's the kind of thing that we had at our sort of product roadmap. We knew that we wanted to do it, but only when we built this internal prototype were we struck by the magic of it and how much it changed the way that we worked internally. And we're an early stage company, and we're very flexible and lean into those approaches. And so I would say early in the process of de-risking research and building prototypes, we get a lot more conviction about things are that we're super excited to build. And then we work towards productionizing those things and making sure that we have feedback loops both internally through reinforcement learning and also with our customers to make sure that we're delivering those in a way that's actually going to solve real problems and not just be something that's like a demo that's is it durable. And then we lean very heavily on early access with customers and with internal partners to make sure that we're designing things in a way that when they're launched very broadly, are going to be really delightful, very polished, and of course, designed with safety, trust, security in mind, which is consistent part of the product development process as well. So hopefully that gives you a sense of some of the big building blocks. I would say, always be consistent and clear about your vision and your goals, prototype super early and de-risk research as early as possible, double down where you see internal conviction and conviction with your customers, and then build for production, working closely with it.
Love that framework. And when you do decide to experiment with different features or product services like artifacts, is that typically led based on what you're hearing from your user base? Is it more of a internally led initiative where you know what your North Star is and it's the next sort of logical step on that journey?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of both of those things. I think our users, especially our power users, are extremely vocal about things that they're excited about or things that are blocking them from implementing Claude into larger components of their workflows. But we are also extremely heavy users of our own product. And I would say that we're on the early adopter sphere building these things. And so almost everyone at Anthropic uses Claude for the majority of the work production that they are doing. And so we also discover these challenges and these problems very early in the development process as well. And so where we feel the pain ourselves and where that mirrors what we're hearing from our customers and our community, and what also aligns with our future vision of where we see Claude in 1 year, where there's an intersection between those three things, we're going to go all in on those kinds of capabilities. But I think we're very reflective of what our customers look like in the way that we are building and with Claude in each of our workflows, whether we're our engineering teams, marketing teams, or sales teams. But I think, it's combining those user inputs in addition to where our vision is and in addition to where we're surprised in the testing process.
I'd love to chat a bit about just the novelty of user experience when building with LLMs and generative AI. How do you go about tackling that ambiguity? The market has definitely given some signals as to what users prefer, and the chat interface really was popularized with the launch of ChatGPT. But when you do think about new user experiences and like the interfaces that folks want to see when they're dealing with Claude, is that a very test-driven approach? It must involve a lot of creativity.
Yeah, I think we keep coming back to this idea of doubling down on the surprise. And I think that is so unique in this industry because of how malleable the technology is and how widespread the adoption is and how early the UI paradigms and primitives that exist are to use this technology. I think you see customers hacking their own solutions and users hacking their own solutions and building really amazing things for themselves. And we sit in the vantage point where we can sort of work with those customers and see from how they tell us they're using it, where they're very inspired by how Claude is changing their lives. We can see and get inspired by those surprises. And so when we thought about building something like artifacts, we were very much in the early thinking about things like documents and sort of code snippets, and iterating on those meaningful outputs that are part of work because people are currently doing them in other tools like IDEs, document surfaces, but really they're iterating with Claude on that content and they would be copy pasting it into other places, changing it, copy pasting it back in. And so our idea was to shorten the feedback loop between meaningful creation and iteration with Claude, but that internally we had one engineer and a designer actually prototype and build in rich web content as a sort of like inspired to create something new for themselves at like 2 in the morning one night. And the next day, so many people at the company were building new micro apps to do actual, durable, real workflows directly within Claude, and also doing things like creating games and inspiring fun and creativity of what you can create. And that really broadened our perspective of what this thing could be in a way that was surprising. And so seeing the love that people responded to it, seeing solutions that people were building themselves that were pushing the thing to the boundary of what it was designed and built for or beyond it, allowed us to gain conviction around that surprise. And so I think that we have high-level perspective of what are the key building blocks or primitives of what an amazing virtual collaborator would look like in, a year. Things like knowledge, things like capability, the ability to interact with systems that you interact with at work day to day. Those are primitives or big building blocks that we might build towards. But ultimately, as we prototype these things, as we hear from customers, as we're surprised by how they're utilizing them, and also how we're surprised by how our internal people who are very knowledgeable and experts on this technology and have agency to change it, where they build novel solutions, where we see the surprise, where people fall in love and build magical things, we're going to double down on those things when it overlaps with the problems that our customers are trying to solve and the vision of where we're going. So I really think it comes down to doubling down on the surprise. And I think that's unique in this industry because of how malleable the technology is. I'm curious to hear about what we can expect from Claude going forward. And maybe another way to frame the question is like, in 10 years, if you're looking back on what this product might evolve into, how would you expect users to use a tool like Claude? How embedded will it be into their day-to-day lives? Yeah, I think one thing that I think about at a very high level, and I think it'll happen sooner than 10 years, is I like to think about, imagine working with Claude as you would an expert coworker who is capable of helping you get done what would have taken a team of subject matter experts weeks to do, and getting that done in days. And so doing something like a migration from Python 2 to Python 3 in your code base, having Claude help you through that entire process and actually do a meaningful chunk of that work with you and for you, and you guide it and review the work. I think about that sort of modality as Claude is the expert team of coworkers helping you get done meaningful work with your oversight and feedback in the process. And if we think about where we're going on that dimension and what are the building blocks that are going to help get us there, there are a couple of key things that are just evolutions or extensions of the things that we already see within our product suite today. So we have things like artifacts for crafting, creating, and iterating on meaningful outputs. We have things like projects, which are collections of knowledge, all of which is in context right now in terms of documents that you can provide to Claude, and it will see those documents and help you do work using that subject matter expertise. We have primitives for collaborating with other people directly in Claude, seeing the activity that people are publishing to shared feeds. So you can think about some of these primitives and how they'll evolve over time. You can imagine projects supporting much larger scales of knowledge. You can imagine them being connected into systems of record automatically so that Claude's knowledge about your business is refreshing. Things like artifacts, you could imagine being connected directly into other tools where work is getting done today. It will continue to get done and to actually create outputs of work that can feed into other systems. So these are a couple of the kinds of things that you can think about how they would evolve over time, of course, from the primitives that exist today to make Claude a more proactive and capable and knowledgeable sort of virtual collaborator. I'd love to zoom out a bit and just think about the foundation model layer a bit more broadly and hear your thoughts on how you think about competition in the API model layer, and how do you think about maintaining a competitive edge in the space. Anthropic has obviously come out as one of the top players in the space, but I think folks are keen to see how things evolve with, open source models continuing to improve. So, would love to hear your reflections on that. Yeah, I think the first thing is that we are defining and creating a market that really nobody fully understands. The first thing I would say is I think there will always be lots of players in this market because of the magnitude of what we were trying to do in terms of taking sort of intelligence and making it more accessible to integrate into products that you are building. We're also lowering the floor for building products at all. And so I think we will enable a class of sort of creation to happen that was previously quite difficult because subject matter expertise was siloed. So I think the market for sort of this intelligence is already really big. But as you lower the floor for creation of new software, creation of new products, creation of new businesses, then that market becomes even bigger. And those two things feed into each other in a sort of virtuous cycle. And so first thing I would say is I think that the market is really big and there will be lots of modalities or ways that different players will work. I think one key area for us on the API and the Claude.ai application side is we're really enterprise first, and we're building solutions that are tailored for sort of seamless integration into very complex company infrastructures and sort of workflows. And it's also critically important that we prioritize safety, security, compliance to work with those really large businesses. And so being at the frontier of how we can make it easy for businesses to integrate our solutions, whether it's the API or Claude, and how we build those in a safe and secure and balanced way in terms of innovation and safety, that's really critical for those large businesses. Then there are also additional, capabilities that you can lean into more to help specific types of user personas solve specific or targeted problems. So I talked earlier about being Claude as a knowledgeable sort of virtual collaborator or companion. How do we make Claude more knowledgeable that feeds into those businesses who are trying to use that subject matter expertise? Knowledge work is called knowledge work because people are using knowledge to do their work. How can we integrate Claude into your knowledge repository so that it can help craft and create meaningful work? That is sort of, one capability of a million that you could build, but focusing more on that will help you target and deliver value for specific customer segments sooner rather than later. And there are other things like the context window length and, having a longer context window supports larger, meatier workflows that require that context to actually complete the specific, job that you were trying to do. And then lastly, I think things like options, having the right number of solutions available on different cloud platforms with different models to solve different use cases. And in the Claude 3 family of models, there's Q, which is great for sort of small, high volume, really low latency tasks. You have Sonnet, which is sort of in the middle in terms of intelligence. And then you have Opus, which is very, very intelligent, but a little bit slower and a little bit costlier. And having different options at the model layer, but also the cloud platform layer, allows businesses of different flavors who have different use cases pick the thing that makes the most sense for them. So I think it's a combination of what you prioritize, who your audience is, and who you really want to double down for, the capabilities that you choose to double down on that audience, and the sort of menu of options that you provide to people, and how you simplify the deployment of any solution for a given use case. And those are a few of the variables, I think, for how the markets could evolve, and we always want to be at the frontier of many of those variables. Very well put. I know that Anthropic separates out the research team and the applications team, but I am curious to hear if you see a company being research first or product first, and those be conflicting priorities, or is it more harmonious than that? How do you strike the right balance between, core research work to make these models even more powerful, but also maintaining a strong culture for productizing that intelligence in a really thoughtful way? Yeah, I think that you do everything to make those harmonious. I think ultimately we are building towards AGI, right? And I think that that is always primarily going to be research-led in terms of what is the path towards safe AGI, safe and responsible AGI. Research will be at the frontier of helping the entire organization think about what that critical path looks like and what steps we need to make at different time horizons to get to that path. So, I am a product person, but I will make no sort of claim to me being the one or the product organization being the one to chart the course to AGI. That is absolutely a research-led initiative, and we were founded as a research lab, and that is deeply in our DNA. And I think that's a great, because those are the people with the most insight about what that path looks like, what we have to be prepared for, how we embed safety into that process, and even what the variables that we'd be able to productize are in the future. So I think it's always important that research is leading the way on how we think about that path to AGI and safe AGI. But I think product should be extremely harmonious in that process. And not only because ultimately we want to build stuff that people are putting into their processes, either using themselves to solve problems with Claude AI or implementing into solutions that they're delivering to their customers. These people ultimately need a product that will help them solve a particular problem, but also real examples and real pragmatic things that we build to solve problems for people also help the research team guide how to design a particular solution, how to think about what they should be fine-tuning for, or data they should be collecting in pre-training. What are the kinds of capabilities that we should build natively to this model to be amazing at, whether it's retrieval or tool use. Like, the shape of those customer problems is really critical in both defining at a high level what capabilities we want, but also doing things like reinforcement learning for making sure that the way that we continue to train Claude to solve particular problems, that the problems are indicative of what we actually want to deliver directly to customers. And so closing the feedback loop between research and product, I think, is not only good for building a product that will help actually solve problems, it's helpful for embedding into the model itself the labor of intelligence that will help you productize something. And that's where we see things like those research sprints that I was talking about so critical, because there are often many different research solutions for a high level thing like even a retrieval or sort of tool use. And we have to think about real customer problems to help us zoom into the flavored solution that is going to work for customers the best, but also from a research risk and technical feasibility standpoint. And so I think that having them be fully separate would be really bad. Having them be harmonious is really good. But ultimately, I think research is the team that's paving the way towards safe AGI. And as a product team, we have to be embedded in that process.
Awesome. I really appreciate Anthropic's focus on trust and safety since the inception of the company. There was a great paper that was put out by the research team called Mapping the Mind of a Large Language Model with the introduction of the steering API. I don't know if you have purview into that side or that research or that work being done, but if you do, would be curious to hear about what the steering API means for builders.
Yeah, so I think first, before going into the steering API, I think like trust and safety, I think, are the lifeblood of what we are doing. And so I think understanding the model and steering it towards certain behaviors that will solve real problems, and then also steering it away from behaviors that are, potentially harmful, I think is one avenue of safety that we are sort of at the frontier of, and we want to continue thinking about both from a product but also a research standpoint. But then there are so many other things and ways as well that we're embedding safety into our process and sort of company DNA. Things like our responsible scaling policy, which actually dictates the way that you structure your organization and your processes overall. Something similar to how physical labs and science labs think about things like biosafety levels and how you need to structure your lab if you're researching different classes of risky diseases or something, and how you'd structure yourself to inherently be sort of safe in that process.
we're doing something very similar for AI. So I think, steerability is one component. It's one component in a sort of plethora of processes and frameworks that we have to make sure that safety is deeply embedded in the entire process. But in terms of steerability, the way that I think about it is, at a high level, you feed these models tremendous amount of data, and then they are reducing that data into a set of variables or features which guide the model towards specific behaviors when it has some input. So you provided some input, it sort of fires the features that are most relevant given the input to weight or sort of influence what those outputs are. And so if you think about something like an engineering workflow for, writing SQL queries or something, the kinds of features that would probably be important for that, but the kinds of features that you would think are things like SQL, things like database structures, things like writing complex code. There are sort of these features which are very abstract that in conjunction or in combination, if you're able to light them up, could help you solve that particular problem more effectively. We launched something like, a few months ago, Golden Gate Claude, which was, we discovered a feature that it was sort of around the Golden Gate Bridge and knowledge about the Golden Gate Bridge. And we really dialed that one up. And then all of Claude's responses were about, some flavor of thinking it was the Golden Gate Bridge. And that's a really good example of just the sort of, things that are guiding Claude towards any particular answer. And so the steering API is sort of a way to identify and then light up specific features that might be useful for a specific workflow. We're in the very early days of this. This is something that we're excited to continue working closely with customers to understand those workflows, the potential features that would help them with those workflows, how to evaluate success. It is really, really important. And so I do think it's early, but I think the research is really groundbreaking, and I can imagine a million ways that we might productize it in the future to help people solve specific problems that require that, again, subject matter expertise.
Super interesting. And it's really interesting to think of a future where the principles outlined in that paper and that are embedded in the steering API, how those impact prompt engineering and the non-determinism involved with building with large language models. If you're able to have a lot more control over these features and dictate what's firing and what's not, it can be a huge breakthrough for getting more control around these models and integrating them into products.
Yeah, and the reality is that there are a number of different controls which make sense in different circumstances. And so if I am a person using Claude at work, it's probably good enough if I just provide Claude some data. If I'm trying to do a simple task like, write a SQL query or something, I can probably just give it examples of SQL queries I've written in the past and the schema for what I'm trying to write query to do, and Claude will be able to use that context to help me do the job. But if you are building a product that is just a SQL query creator or something, like just giving a few examples is not going to be sufficient. You will have to have something like the steering API or tool use or fine tuning, and so there are different levers that different audiences will have to be able to pull, depending on the persona that you are and what problem you're trying to solve and what surface you're trying to solve it on. If you're a developer building something versus a knowledge worker trying to solve a problem. And so we'll have to build a number of these different levers for Claude to understand the problem, have the necessary context to solve the problem, and then the right guardrails for solving the problem, either in a very structured.
This has been a super fun conversation. I'd love to close out with a couple of final questions that we like to ask our guests. The first one being, do you have any hot take, contrarian takes on the AI space that you'd like to share?
I think my hot take or maybe contrarian take is that I think a lot of people right now are focused very much on efficiency as it relates to AI. How can you do stuff faster with fewer resources than you had to before?
But the thing that I'm very excited about, and if you see this in things like artifacts we watched, is to me the more exciting thing is enabling a class of creation that was previously impossible. And so doing stuff faster is great, but I think the thing that really excites me is allowing people who previously didn't have the agency to create things can now actually create those things, whether that's creating a strategy for a particular market that you want to break into as a business, or whether that's creating a video game of side-scrolling dinosaurs jumping over trees, which is something that I built for my cousin. That's the kind of thing that I previously would have no business doing. It would be too challenging for me to do, but something like artifacts within Claude AI, I was able to do in 5 minutes, right? And so I think the thing that excites me is lowering the floor for meaningful creation and how that's going to change the way that people are working and the amount that they're able to produce and the amount that they're able to expand their own minds on what they're capable of and really fulfilling potential. So that's what I'm really excited. Awesome. And any parting thought or advice for product builders that are leveraging LLMs to deliver new user experiences? Yeah, go build stuff. I think, as I mentioned earlier, being surprised and doubling down on the surprise. We're still so early in this sphere, and there are all these new ways that people have to work with AI products in terms of non-deterministic outputs, prompting versus fine-tuning versus steering. Like, there's so many levers and different ways to use these things. I think the fastest way that people will become familiar and build something that's really awesome is if they go and try to build it for themselves. So I would say to go and try to build something and then sell it to someone. And that is going to be the way that you're going to learn this technology the fastest, get surprised, and then double down on that. Awesome. Thank you so much for all the wisdom and advice, Scott. It's been a real pleasure. Thanks, Hamza.